welcome to the Cat Knits podcast. I'm Kat, and this is a monthly podcast where I chat about all the knitting I've been up to. So I live in Vancouver, Canada, and right now it is a gorgeous sunny evening. We're lucky because we're kind of more north, so far away from the equator. So we get these long sunny evenings, which is great because now I'm able to film after work. So it's, I think, 6:30 right now, and there's still enough natural light that I'm not covered in darkness. So we are now, I can't believe it, but we're halfway through 2023. And so with that, took a look at all the different projects that were on my needles and made a bit of a rough plan. So when I looked, I had 8 projects, which is a bit too many, a bit overwhelming, and by the end of June I managed to get it down to 4. So I'll go through those finished projects, and then I also made progress on a few sweaters. The theme of this podcast is definitely sweaters. I've got 3 adult size sweaters that I'm gonna chat about. Before I get into the knitting though, I wanted to talk about these earrings that I'm wearing. So those of you that might know, I did work at a yarn store for like 8 or 9 months-ish. I did recently quit because I'm trying to finish my master's in the next month, and I just need to focus on that full time. But when I was working there, I met lots of wonderful knitters, and one of those, actually, she designed and hand created these earrings, and she is kind of trying to, she's ramping up her business. She has some tables at farmers markets. I think she also has an online presence. So this is Flower Circle Craft. Editing Catherine here. Her business is called Yellow Flower Crafts, and she has a table at the UBC Farmers Market a couple Saturdays this summer, and that's where you can check out her beautiful jewelry pieces. And she's also a student at UBC, and she works at the UBC farm over the summer. She does their bouquets. So if you love gardening and just fresh cut flowers, she's also got fun stories to go with the flowers. She posts all about this on her Instagram. So if you love gardening, it's another reason to follow her. She also does knit as well, having worked at a yarn store. And then she's got lots of these gorgeous earrings. She also does beaded necklaces, which are gorgeous, like all different kind of glass, rainbow colored beads. She also does earrings that have different types of beans in them, like coffee beans or like speckled beans. So yeah, you should definitely check her out. I think they're just gorgeous, and they remind me of summer and spring, which, I mean, who doesn't like to be reminded of the warmer months? All right, so now to get into the knitting. The first thing that I finished, which I'm very proud of, is my Guthrie Sweater by Caitlin Hunter. This is an all-over colorwork sweater. I'm gonna insert a video of me wearing it. It is a yoke sweater, so you do the yoke, and then you separate the body and the sleeves, and then you kind of knit for the body, knit for the sleeves, and all the increases are in the yoke itself. And then there are some short rows in the pattern, which is why, if you look, the color work is a bit lower in the back than it is in the front, and that's because that's where the short rows are. For this garment, I used La Bien-Aimée merino sport weight. I think it's just called Merino Sport. It's a superwash merino, and this is the Winterfell color. And then for my contrast color, I used Spincycle dyed in the wool, which is also a sport weight, and this is hand dyed, hand spun in the US, which is how it has this kind of beautiful color gradient, because the hand spinning allows them to shift between all these different colors, and this is the color Wololo. As you can see, there is huge variation within the skeins. So this sweater used 4 of each, although just barely 4 of each. It was, it's always more satisfying when you're left with almost no wool, where unfortunately I've got almost a full skein of each, which means I think I can do a, small sweater, or I was thinking maybe like a brioche hat where this is the main color and then this is like the background color. I thought that could be really pretty because the Spincycle will kind of gradually change in the background. We'll see. I've also always dreamed of doing the Shifty Sweater by Andrea Mowry, which is a bunch of Spincycle. Then you have this kind of, the shades are changing color, but it's color work with two of them. So it creates this kind of beautiful marled-ish effect. So I ran out of yarn. I did both the sleeves first with the hope that I would be able to get the body done with the rest of the yarn, but I ended up getting just to here when I ran out of the Spincycle, and I can't remember when I ran out of the Le Bien-Ami. I want to say the Le Bien-Ami was even later when I had to move on to my fourth skein, or third, sorry, it was 3 of Le Bien-Ami and 4 of the Spincycle, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, so I mean, it was necessary. I had to do it to finish the garment. I knit this in a extra large size where I'm typically, I think, a small or a medium. And the reason why is because my gauge was a lot smaller. And a couple other people on Ravelry did talk about how they got smaller gauge, just because I think in my case though, like the pattern does call for a DK and a sport weight, whereas I have 2 sport weights, so I have thinner yarn. And I just decided though to keep the smaller gauge because I really liked the way the swatch turned out. And so rather than, increasing my needle size, I just increased the sweater size. I did do a little bit of sweater math, and I talked about this, I think, in my March podcast episode. I'll put a link to it below, but I talked about how my stitch gauge was really off, so that's like the width of my sweater, but my row gauge was actually really close. So what did I end up doing is I ended up doing like an extra large whenever the width was concerned, and then I did a small whenever the length was concerned. So I did a small number of short rows, I did the depth of yoke of a small, but I did the extra large when it came to the width. And I talk about this like growth and shrink factor where I divide the number of stitches of my swatch by the amount I'm supposed to have, and then it gives you a fraction, or you can convert it into percentage to see how much your sweater will grow or shrink based on your gauge swatch and the designer's gauge swatch. I'm super happy with how it turned out. Ironically, I thought I was gonna have a low contrast sweater. Clearly, this is not low contrast. I don't think there's anything about this that is low contrast. It's got very vibrant sleeves that stand out. I was lucky. I ended up purposely starting both my sleeves on a similar color, as you can see. Like, I started with the purples just to give a little more cohesion to the sweater, but they are fairly similar, maybe not as similar as I was imagining, but I like to think of them as being somewhat similar. They start off similar, and I think that's really the important part in terms of making the sweater look good together. It fits, which is always, that's my first goal when I knit a sweater, is making sure it fits. It is a yoke sweater, which I don't think I love a yoke sweater. This is my first yoke sweater. I've done a raglan, and this is my yoke sweater that I've done. I like the fit of a raglan a bit more. I like how the lines kind of divide up the top of my body. I do really want to try like a inset sleeve sweater or a saddle shoulder sweater. Ozetta has a couple saddle shoulder sweaters that I've been wanting to try. The yarn itself, the Spincycle, is gorgeous. It's fun to work with, but it is very pricey. Same with Le Bien-Ami. They're both very soft yarns. I've become more of a fan of the non-superwash yarns just because for some reason, well, I mean, they're not as slippery because the scales have been removed. The scales on the yarn is what allows it to felt and like stick together. So I just kind of get bothered when my skeins are falling apart in my stash, whereas when I'm working with my non-superwash skeins, the yarn it's a lot neater because it has the tooth on it still to keep the skein together. Overall, the yarns are great. I would use them again. I probably won't for a while, but it is fun to see the colors changing in the Spincycle. It does make the project, it really feels fun to continue to make progress because you're constantly knitting in a new color and kind of wondering, when's the next color going to transition, where is it going to transition, how's it going to look. So it just pulls your interest in to the sweater. And I do find a lot of Caitlin Hunter designs, she does partner with Spincycle quite a bit, and you can see she has a lot of all over colorwork sweaters, which I think do look gorgeous. There are whenever you go on Ravelry, you can see like suggested yarns that other people have used, and there are a few that are more affordable that are like Spincycle, like I think it's called Zotterball, and then Noro Yarns is another one that people tend to swap out with. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I wanted to say about the sweater. Oh, I know what happened. I finished both the sleeves. I think I talked about this last time. I finished both the sleeves, and then I found out that I had incorrectly done the end of both the sleeves. So that was kind of this past month I worked up the courage to rip out both the cuffs on both the sleeves and then refix the knitting and knit back and then finish off the body of the sweater. This last ball of Spincycle that I got is a lot more of the purpley and reds. It's a lot more uniform in color, whereas the other ones I found have quite a bit more color variation within them, like more blues and reds and browns, whereas that one is mainly just purplies. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about the Guthrie. It was fun to knit. I would knit another Caitlin Hunter design again, and hopefully I will. I've got the horses t-shirt kind of in the back of my mind for something that I would like to knit of hers next. I'm excited to actually get to wear this. Unfortunately now it's too hot, but that's okay because before I know it, I'm sure it'll be cool enough to wear. We tend to have pretty cool weather in Vancouver. Okay, so speaking of sweaters, the other finished project that I wanted to talk about, which I gave to my friend at her baby shower, is a onesie, and I knit it in this yarn. This is a sock yarn. It's Fiddly Dye Works, which is a local company. They hand dye the yarn, and this is the colorway Harlow, and this is a BFL sock. So it has nylon in it, and then it's BFL as well, which I thought was a good choice for the mom. I really do love BFL yarn. It's a bit shinier than merino. I think it is a little bit toothier than merino, so it tends to grip a little bit better and maybe be a little bit stronger if I'm remembering correctly my yarns. And last time I showed it when it was wet, but I'll include some photos. It's just so interesting so it's the Turalanga onesie by Shaw. I know I've probably butchered both the name and both the pattern name and her name, sorry about that. But it is this gorgeous kind of lace onesie with cute little cables. It's knit back and forth, and then you split for some shaping at the bottom so that you can kind of do like a diaper back and then a front. And when I blocked it and once it let it dry and then weaved in all the ends, sewed on the buttons, it just looks like a whole new project to me. It turned out, I think, great. That's the second time that I've made that onesie, and it won't be the last. I did use more than, I think I used 2/3 of 100-gram skein of fingering weight yarn, so unfortunately you can't quite squeeze out 2, and I did the 0 to 3 month size, I decided, for them. So that is a pattern I would definitely recommend. I will be doing more of that. It's interesting, now that I've been knitting for a few years, I've just started to get to the point where I will knit a project more than once. Originally I was like, oh my goodness, how does anyone ever want to re-knit something? It just seems, you don't have that, like, the joy of something new. Often, well, even just like all sorts of things, like the honeymoon period, where if something's new, it's just all of a sudden it's fantastic, the novelty of it. But I've turned the corner, and clearly those projects that you kind of look back on fondly, that turned out really well, especially for gifts, baby gifts. It's nice to kind of have an arsenal of patterns that you can use. So that is one that I would recommend and will knit again. So that was the second project that I got done this month, although that was just really sewing on all the buttons and weaving in all the ends, which does take a significant amount of time. That I realized is something I should have done with my Guthrie sweater, is get into the habit of weaving in ends as I go. It would just make my life so much better. For the Guthrie sweater, rather than like try to splice my ends together, which I think you can do with natural wool, it's a little bit harder, I believe, when the wool is not superwash. So when it is superwash, I think it's a little bit harder to felt it together. In fact, I thought that you can't felt superwash wool. I'm not sure. So anyway, so I think it's called the Russian join everywhere. Whenever I had to join a new ball, I just find it's my lazy version of joining a new ball, but it does create lots of ends that you have to kind of weave in because you have these long bits on either end. It's not maybe the most efficient after the project's done, but I just find it's really quick for me to do mid-project. I don't have to worry about splicing apart yarn and trying to felt it together. So yeah. Okay, so now to the works in progress. So those are my two projects that I got done in June, and then I made progress on two that I have shown on the channel before, and one of those is the PetiteKnit Cumulus Blouse, which I believe is one of PetiteKnit's most popular patterns. I think it's in the top 10 patterns on Ravelry of all time, most popular, possibly. And I am knitting that in Fiberco yarn, and that it's called Suro, and it is a cotton core with Surrey alpaca, I believe, and merino wool. Oh, there you go. So it's merino and Surrey on the outside, and then it's got a cotton core. It's super soft and light. So that sweater that I showed you is going to be very warm because I've got all over colorwork. So in a lot of places I've got two yarns kind of layering on each other. And like I said, I think I used 4 skeins of the Spincycle, well, almost, so that's 200 grams, and then I used 3 of the Labana Me, which is 300 grams, so it's almost on the light, it's between like probably a 400 gram sweater, so it's pretty heavy. It's going to be really warm. This sweater is knit at a looser gauge, so although this is also a sport weight yarn, so I think the Guthrie was knit at, was it 2.75? Does that sound right? It was a small needle. I'm not sure how small, but this one is knit at, here we go. I think it's a 5. It's a 5.5 size needle. Let me see. It is, so it's a 4.5. It's a US 7 needle, 4.5 millimeters. I think the Guthrie was knit in a 3.75 needle or 3.5 needle. So it's got this looser gauge. It's also going to be so much lighter. So for the sweater, I got 4 skeins of this Fiberco kind of sport weight yarn. The pattern does call for, I think it's 2 or 3 strands of mohair held together. I tend to like to see if I can find a single yarn substitute, just because you tend to just save a bit of money. I've done that a lot with finding, rather than like holding, a lot of patterns will have a mohair held with another strand of yarn. I'll try to find a yarn that has a mohair in it, so then it has that natural fluffiness that kind of looks very pretty and gives the very softness when touching, not necessarily against your skin, but when touching it, it feels really soft. So that's why I ended up, rather than holding 2 strands of silk mohair single, I found this one, which is got the Surrey. I also wanted to try Surrey over mohair. Some people might find mohair itchy, some people find Surrey itchy. So it's kind of seen as, you can test it out as another one of those like kind of very soft but longer strand fibers. And yeah, so this should only be 200 grams, so less than half the weight of my other sweater, and it's so airy. It's gorgeous. So here you can see I think the last time I showed this, I had maybe split for the sleeves and joined the neck, but now, as you can see, I've made a pretty good amount of progress on the body of the sweater. I still have quite a bit more to go. The basic construction is you kind of cast on up here, and then it's a raglan style. So you increase at the raglan, and then you also increase at the V, and then you join at the bottom. And at some point during all that process, you end up taking the sleeves off and joining to knit in the round. Or sorry, you're knitting in the round. Well, you're knitting back and forth while you're doing the neck. And then you join to knit in the round once you knit underneath the neck, join the V of the pattern together. It's been good. I find this is a great project just because it is straight stockinette, where you can just put it down and pick it up at any time. If I think I only have like a few minutes to knit, or if I'm not really in the mood to do anything complicated, this is a great project to pick up. It's also great because it's so light, so it's very transportable, whereas my Guthrie, we're looking at, the sweater is going to be over a pound in weight, let alone with all those balls that you're carrying around. I am a little bit bored of doing the body. I ended up taking the needles off, and I think I'm gonna switch to doing the sleeves for a little bit, just because then you get faster progress. I'm not sure why my mindset has kind of changed when knitting the body of it. Oh, my dog is upset. I don't know if you could hear that. But my mindset, normally I love stockinette. Well, I kind of go back and forth with the love-hate, and I really loved it a month ago, but for some reason, maybe I don't know what kind of mood I'm in, but I haven't really been in the stockinette mood. So, and this does require a lot of stockinette because it's finished with I-cord edging. I am planning on maybe that'll help, doing an I-cord on the neck before I get to the bottom, just because I've heard it's nice to get your neck finished, because it might kind of bring up your sweater, which will affect the length of it. So if you're worried, you don't want to kind of bind off, do your I-cord bottom, and then by the time you do your neck, you realize that it pulled it up and now your sweater is too short and you have to rip it back out. I've heard that as some advice. So I'll be finishing the neck. It's also fun to have a finished neck when you try it on. That's the great thing about a top-down sweater, is you can try it on as you're knitting. So you might as well have the neck done so it looks a little formal, and then you kind of get an idea. This is also fitting, so we're, I think we're 2 for 2 for fit. As you can see, it is designed to be sheer or see-through. So it's kind of something that you might wear as more of like a summer kind of light layer. The photo of her is on the beach, which really is actually very BC to be on the beach with a long sleeve sweater, because it gets pretty windy and cold at the beach. I think this is a very wearable sweater, although I'm resisting right now my knitting of it. I think that this will probably be like very much a staple. I think the Guthrie, I do love the look of like blue on blue, like blue jeans and a blue sweater. but this gray, just because it is more simple, it just, the elegance in the simplicity of it is great. And it's been fun to try out another yarn. So this is, so I said that I started the month with 8 projects, and I've talked about 2 of them now, the Onesie and the Guthrie. This is another one. This is the 4th one that I've made some progress on, and then, or the 3rd one, sorry, and then the 4th one, which I've also chatted about on the podcast, but I made a really good amount of progress on, and that is, I'll show the photo first. It's the, oopsies, the Guernsey Sweater, and that is in the Sandnes Garn book. It's called, I think it's Soft Knits for Ladies, so that's the Norwegian. I think it's Norwegian, not Swedish. And it's this sweater. It's a very oversized textured sweater. As you can see, the sleeves are absolutely ridiculously long. I don't know if that's a good shot or not. So I'm planning on probably cutting out part of that. But here, for that, I am using another Fiber Co yarn, and it is the Cumbria. It fell, 1 second. So it's here, and as I mentioned, so that pattern actually originally calls for 2 yarns held together. So a mohair and a DK weight yarn, I believe, which is approximately a worsted yarn. So I ended up using, I found this worsted yarn, which is a blend. It has mohair in it. So here, I'll just give a little, this is what the front, so it's also top down. This is the front, oops, and this is the back. And so this yarn is in the colorway Saddle Black Slate, and it is a 90% wool, 10% mohair, and the wool itself is, it hasn't, oh, I don't think it actually has, I thought it had a name, the sheep had a name. Oh yeah, it's a blend of Masham, wool, merino, and mohair. And the Masham, I believe, is like an English yarn. So it's got that softness, it's got a bit of halo to it, and I think the fact that it has those 2 yarns blended together is why the color, I don't know if you can see, it has like a bit of depth to it. It kind of has like gray speckles and a little bit kind of hair coming off of it. So I ended up doing quite a few swatches for this project, which I did go over last time. I originally actually bought the white color, but I didn't love the way this looked, so then I ended up trying the white with a mohair, and looking back on the swatch, I do like it quite a bit more. But when I ended up trying the gray color, I loved this the most. I have a gray sweater. Oh my dog, just I don't know how much that hit it, 1 second. I can't really tell while it's running, but I think it's good enough. I just had a little bit of water. So there is a huge difference, as you can see, when you're knitting in white. Like, look how clear and crisp those X's are, whereas when you're knitting in a dark color, just since the light is being absorbed, you can't see it to the same degree. But I actually like the look. I like the fact that that the style is a little more muted in the darker color. To me, it was a plus. This just looked a little too traditional to me, not quite modern enough. This to me looked more cozy and enjoyable. So it requires 6 skeins of wool. So again, that's 600 grams. So that's over a pound. That's heavier in theory than the Guthrie sweater. And just like the Guthrie, how I ran out of Spincycle and I had to go buy another skein, I am slightly worried the same thing is gonna happen, because this, I've already used up 1 skein of yarn, and to me this does not look like 1/6 of a sweater. Now it is a drop shoulder, so I do have some length right now for the sleeve, but there's a lot left in this sweater. I hope that's not the case, because yeah, I don't want to have to worry about dye lots and finding the skein and all that. So I'm just gonna trust that it's gonna work out. Whenever I swap my yarns, I look at whatever of the two yarns that are held together has the longest yardage, and then I make sure that I have that amount of yardage in the new yarn. And typically patterns will kind of do like a 10% bump up. So when you're looking at the length, I always make sure that I have enough for that length, and then with that, you should have enough. So I should have enough. The fun thing about the sweater, which is something I haven't done before, is you start with the back. So you do the back panel. I did kind of do this on one of PetiteKnit's patterns, but then as you go, you kind of pick up on either side of the back to do the two shoulders. And as you do that, you shape for the neck and for the fact that your back is higher than the front. So so this is the back here, and then you're probably not gonna be able to see it because it's so dark, but this is the spot where I picked up stitches. And this is seed stitch at the top here, which basically hides all mistakes. It's wonderful. But you can see, so I picked up here, and then as I was knitting, I added, there's short rows in the pattern, which kind of creates this extra triangle of fabric, just because then to account for like this part of your shoulder it's a little bit raised, it kind of like needs that extra bit of fabric. So you have some short rows to kind of get going here, and then you slowly knit out so that you meet up here, and then as you do it, you do some neck shaping. So I think you do little decreases at the beginning, or increases, I don't know, you do decreases, right, and then you do increases as you come around the front, and then that's what gives the neck. And I'm very proud to say that my head does fit through the hole, so that's always a good first sign. And I'm going to, just like I want to for the petite knit pattern, I want to do the neck. I do finish off the neck, just so when I try it on, I can get a visual of what it's supposed to look like. It is supposed to be quite oversized, so the neck is quite big and chunky. So as you can see, I'm just at the beginning of the sweater. I've done the X's on the back, which I think might be my favorite and quite possibly maybe the one of the more challenging charts to follow, especially with the dark color. And then I just need to do the same on the front. And then after that, I believe I join in the round, and then I start continuing on with the charts to do the following parts. Here, I'll just show the photo again. It's been a lot of fun to knit. I've been favoring this one a bit more over the petite knit one lately. So on the back, I'm at this point, but on the front, I still have all this to do. Which it doesn't look like it, which when you look at the photo, it does look like maybe I have done a 6 of the sweater, maybe? I don't know, because you can see how far dropped the shoulder is. I did get gauge, but based on how my sweater is knitting, it doesn't quite, there seems to be a discrepancy. I'm trying just to trust and then adjust. I'm gonna block it. I think I'm gonna do the neck, I'm gonna join, maybe I'll do to the bottom of this section, and then I will block it. So I'm really, as you can see, I'm really focusing on building out my summer wardrobe. I actually am very excited because I got a job, not till January, but it's kind of fun. I'll be doing some teaching, so then I kind of want some fun sweaters to wear, especially because it'll be cold. So in January, I can wear these sweaters. Hopefully, I mean, if I'm too nervous, then I'll be sweating, and then I won't be able to wear a 500-600 gram natural wool sweater. It's funny, when I was reading about like the Icelandic, like the Letlopi sweaters, and I think it was Linka Newman. I'll have her name. She has like Scandinavian sweaters, I think they're called, and I really want to knit one of those. So you knit them with the Lopi, but they are, like, I've read that they are so warm. Like, you can go out in the freezing cold Arctic as your last layer and be warm. So I have a feeling that these sweaters that I'm knitting are going to be very warm because they're 100% wool and they're like thick wool. Typically when you buy a sweater from the store, it's quite thin, but when you're like, this is a worsted weight sweater, which means that it's a worsted weight thickness, which means like my sweater is going to be like, you know, 1/2 centimeter thick versus anything I've ever bought in a store is normally like only a couple millimeters thick. So I'll report back on whether my dream of wearing all my hand knits inside teaching becomes a reality or not. I hope so. If not, it's a good excuse. It'll be a good excuse for the next 6 months just to keep on knitting. So those are my big 3 adult sweaters, and that's probably what's the 2 sweaters that I just showed you are what gonna keep me going into July. But I do have, so as I mentioned, I had 8 works in progress at the beginning of June, and I have 4 now. So I've got the Guthrie's done, the onesie is done. I have no idea what the other 2 actually was. I think now I feel like I'm lying. Did I get through 4? 1 second. I got my little knitting journal where I write down every month what projects I start and finish. And the mohair hat, which I think I showed just without the ends woven in. I like to not say that something is done until the ends are woven in. So technically my Guthrie sweater, I need to weave in the ends tonight, which I will, which would make it done for the end of June. So the last thing, which I actually decided that I would not complete, and I don't know if anyone is going to remember this, but back in American Thanksgiving, Dre Renee Knits always holds a sock knit along. And this year for the sock knit along, she took her very popular everyday sock, which I've always wanted to knit, and she did the DK weight version of it. And this is what the socks look like. And with that, she also did a collaboration with Farmer Daughters Fibers. They have a sock yarn kit where you get a sock yarn every month, and they have this yak sock yarn, which I'm very intrigued by and would very much like to try, but I've held back because according to my little yarn journal, I have I think like 10 or 11 skeins of sock yarn, so it's gonna be a while before I can indulge in new sock yarn. But so American Thanksgiving I did cast on, and because it is DK weight, you know, you get pretty far. She had a thing where you could actually choose to hold 2 strands of fingering together. So what I did is I had this beautiful scarf or shawl, and this was actually my first ever kind of larger multi-skein project, and I did this many years ago, but unfortunately I just have never used it because I don't wear shawls. They're not my style. I like big scarves, just not shawls. So I never wore it, and it's made out of single ply merino, hand dyed. It's Dream in Colors. Oh, I know this. It's not Dream State. I'll have to put it below because it's not coming to my mind. I feel like it starts with a J. Anyways, it's one of their yarns. So I decided, you know, I've been wanting to take this apart for forever. So I was like, oh, you know what? I will take it apart and then I can use it in my sock. But there's a couple reasons why I've decided that I'm not going to be knitting the second one and actually ripping out this sock as well. One is it's single ply, and single ply just doesn't have the same lifetime as like a nylon sock yarn. So if I'm going to knit socks, might as well knit it with nylon so that they'll last. The other thing is that they don't fit. I did the foot way too long, so as you can see, it looks a little long, eh? I've got a size 7.5 woman's foot, and this honestly, I think I've done this once before, and I'm sure this is the case again. I think this would fit my husband's foot, not mine. I'm not also very much in love with the kind of the color scheme I've got going on. So for all those reasons, I do want to knit her everyday socks, but I think I'm going to buy her fingering weight pattern and knit the fingering weight version of the socks using a sock yarn, and then I'll rip this out. It's a toe-up sock, and it's got a unique heel. It's called the fledging heel, I think. So it doesn't have any of that extra reinforcement that you kind of can see in some socks, in some heels, but it's got a very cool heel, and it's got a fun cast on. I can't remember what the name of the cast on is, but it was fun to try it out. And the nice thing about toe-up socks is you can, in theory, you know, if you're running out of yarn, you can kind of do 2 toe-up socks and then just keep knitting until you run out of yarn. So that's satisfying. Here, let's see what that name of that cast on was called. I don't even know if this is that interesting, but Turkish cast on. Andrea Mowry always has such great YouTube videos. I find I navigate to hers when I'm looking for tips on how to do different techniques. So this is the second project that I have ever abandoned, the first being the West Knits shawl. I'm trying to, I think too, if there's something that I haven't worked on in 6 months, it's probably because I don't really want to complete it. And yeah, I don't want to complete this because it doesn't fit and it doesn't really make sense. So I'm still trying to think of what projects I could do with this yarn. The purple and pink is very beautiful and I think usable. I'm not as much fan, for me, of the orange and the green. I almost think that I could use them as, like, this green actually is really pretty. Like, this would, to me, would be a very pretty object of some kind if I could find, like, maybe a pair of mitts. Although I would be worried that, you know, when your hands, kind of like your feet, they do get quite a bit of wear. So I think gloves, this might be too thin. So, but that was satisfying that I made that choice. It can feel, I always can fall into the trap of thinking that I need to finish everything. You know, once you start something, you should finish it. But when it comes to your hobbies and things that you're choosing to spend time on, you only have a limited amount of time. So if something doesn't seem like it's going to be used or enjoyed, then sometimes it is better just to kind of cut your losses. I think it's almost like that sunk cost fallacy. It's the idea that, oh, you should, since you've already put so much in, you should just keep going. But really, it's a better idea just to stop. Well, that was everything that I wanted to chat about today. I think it's July 1st, which means that it's actually Canada Day, and my friend is getting married, so we're off on a mini road trip. We're going up to Whistler to celebrate. She's rented, like in the forest somewhere, a wedding venue, so that'll be fun. And I know July 4th, which is America Day? That doesn't sound right. I think it's just called July 4th. Anyways, July 4th is coming up on Monday, so I just wanted to say, for all the Canadians and Americans, it's kind of an exciting long weekend. Normally it means fireworks, celebrations, family time. So hope everyone has a great next couple of days, and I'll see you next month. Bye.